Well, hey there, friends. Hi. It's Sunday, and it's June 15th, which happens to be my sister's birthday. Happy birthday to Laura. Hi. And, yesterday on Instagram, or Friday, and then here on YouTube and on Blue Sky, I did like a little tarot tip, which I really like, and I'm gonna explain because not only did my explanation on Instagram, in writing and elsewhere confuse you, it seems to have annoyed some of you. So let's demonstrate where we're going with this. So I'm just using this deck because I haven't used it in a while and I love it. This is the Queer Crow Death Magic Tarot, which I have shared before, and is to me one of the great decks ever. So, what's the tip, right? The tip is just using the deck in a different way, right? So when I was first learning, there was a video that, not a video, we didn't have YouTube then, there was a TV commercial for Miss Cleo, and she did kind of what I'm about to do. Anyway, that's what the commercial made it look like, right? So rather than reading in spreads, she read in stacks. And she just kind of peeled off a layer of each stack. So that's kind of where we're going. Now, I think where I may have confused folks is kind of the actual process of what we're doing, right? So this specific tip is mostly, I would say, for general readings, or when you have like 9 or 10 things you want to know about one situation, right? So the premise is, and this happens a lot with clients, I've noticed, where they'll have a question, or the reading prompts a question, and we'll pick up the whole cards and shuffle, and I'll do it again, right? I tend to read fast, so I that, again, not a benefit, not a thing, it's not good, not bad, it's just I tend to read fast, I tend to write fast. Even when I'm reading books, I tend to read books fast. My partner was just teasing me about that. So, I do things quickly, some things, and communication things, and so it's okay. I can do 3 readings in a 15-minute session at a fair, right? Like I can do that. But the idea being that like we establish a theme, and then we want to read other things about it, and rather than asking questions and doing a new spread, rather we use the same spread, or the same stacks, and we just keep peeling off layers of the onion. And the confusing thing, I think, was when I talked about intuition. So there was a little bit of logic at play there that may not have made any sense outside of my brain. So let me just quickly talk about my theory of how readings work, right? Like tarot or any divination tool is a translation device between the divine and ourselves, right? I don't know what that means in terms of divinity. It does not seem to be related, in my case anyway, to like my personal guide. I think it taps into sort of a larger collective unconscious, or these are all words that kind of we all use and nobody uses the same way. So whatever that thing is, that funnel of wisdom, that is, you could call it the Akashic records, whatever, right? All of those things, that collective unconscious kind of, and it's facilitators. It's little, not little, it's quite powerful, psychopomps, informational psychopomps, right? Our Mercuries, our Hermes children, who relay it, right? So it's like there's this universal unconscious that has the answers, and the facilitators of that detail, and those are kind of that's why I think when Mercury and Hermes and Thoth, who are all theoretically the same divinity, is so popular in tarot, right? Also, they were the god of divinity, and I'm not just using they because I'm talking about 3 separate names, but because Mercury anyway, or Hermes anyway, is fairly non-binary in the myths about them. So typically depicted as a boy, but I think there's a very queer aspect to Mercury, which is yet another reason why I'm so fond of them. And I often call Mercury him. I think they manifest in different, I don't know what the word is. aggressive, receptive combinations. Anyway, we make an agreement with that. Okay, so the reading is the agreement. The cards, the shuffling, that's the agreement. The questions, all of these are part of the contract that we make when we do a reading. And so I think that the thing that is useful, especially when you're starting out, is to say one question, one reading, right? One question per spread, one question per reading, because a thing where folks get confused a lot, I think I did, is, well, okay, then what version of this question is this spread speaking to? And that's even assuming that the spread you're using speaks to the question, which is another thing, and it's another issue entirely, right? That's actually why I prefer spreads that don't have positional meanings, because then all the cards speak to the question, right? Not some aspect of the question. And that has worked well, and it continues to work well for me. But the other day, I was shuffling, and I had a specific question, and it was just about my insular nature lately. Like, I really don't want to go out. I miss my friends, but I don't seem to be able to get myself to be out in the world. I really just want to be home. I really just want to be reading a book or doing a crossword puzzle, maybe writing. You notice I haven't been making videos much lately. I just don't have that social battery right now, and I just wanted to know why. Like, was I languishing? Was I the one? Was I the reason, or was it necessary? What was going on? And I couldn't decide on what the question is, and so this idea just popped into my head. So I'm gonna do an imaginary version of that very reading. Not I just. If you're curious about the answer, it was yes. You're in a growth state. You're a seedling right now. You're at the very beginning of a lot of cycles, and you've got to germinate. And this makes sense too because it's a hermit year, right? It's a 9 year. Next year will be a magician wheel, very mercurial, incidentally. So what I did was I shuffled and shuffled, and I said I tend to think and formulate the question when I'm reading for myself as I'm shuffling, right? Because the act of shuffling kind of feels like a state, one of those things you can do to like change your brainwave state, right, from like beta to alpha. And as I was shuffling, I just said, well, why don't I just do this? Why don't I lay out stacks of cards like I saw Miss Cleo doing? They were already laid out. I didn't see her do this. And let me just assume that I'm making an agreement with intuition and with the guides or whatever, however this works, that the right question for the next set of cards would formulate in my mind. So that's where I think I lost people. What do I mean by that? I think that when we're shuffling and asking a question, the cards are arranging themselves in such a way that they're going to get just about the right cards to answer the question, right? We're going to get a majority of the right cards. One or two may not be perfect, but they'll be complementary, and every once in a while we get a card or two that just doesn't seem to make sense, right? But there's no way that we can get an exact mix, like the perfect, sometimes we do, especially if we use like 3 cards, but there's always almost one that doesn't quite, so it's like the act of shuffling and thinking about the question kind of arranges the cards in such a way that you're going to get the eventual answer triggered. It may take you longer, it may take you shorter, depending on whatever, but the deck is in just about the right arrangement with some wonky notes, right? Some missed pitches, so to speak. So that's kind of the deck arranges so you lay out the cards and you get the spread. What I'm sort of suggesting in this case is that then once the cards are shuffled and the first question has been asked and read, I'm actually reshuffling myself in the sense, right? I'm allowing, rather than imposing a question, I'm opening myself up to say what is the next question I need to ask for the next set of cards to make sense. So let me just demonstrate this, all right? Because it will make more sense. This is one of those things that it's easier just to see. So I did 3 cards. I'm going to do 5 stacks, rather. I did 3 stacks. And there's different ways to do this. I feel like 5 cards is kind of my minimum if I'm really getting into something, right? 3 is good for a quick reading. 5 cards is kind of, is seems to be like the right number. 90% of the time if I'm not using my 9 cards. And you could break that. You could divide the deck into 9 stacks and read this 9 card. I think that's a lot, but it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point isn't the shape you use. The point is, I have a sense that I want to read about this thing. So I'm reading for a client, and they're like, "Why am I languishing? What's going on? I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do anything." All right. So, but I know that we couldn't articulate the question. There's a lot we want to know. So we know that we're reading about their languishing. And the initial question is sort of, why is that, right? And so we're going to read for that, but chances are we're going to have more questions after that. And so let's turn over, so we lay out the stacks. So we have the Queen of Wands, the Hierophant, and the Lovers, and the Two of Cups, and the Four of Wands. All right, let me zoom in just a skosh so you can see those gorgeous cards a little better. So this is going to be annoying to those of you who, like me, need perfect stacks and straight lines, but it doesn't really matter. Right, so now I would read this. This is a spread I use on my blog a lot. In fact, I'm probably going to use this spread in my blog this week because I have to write it today. And what I usually do is start in the center and then work out, right? So boink, that's kind of my theme, and then these cards expand on it. And I pair them sort of mirrored, but I also pair them on each flanking side. But that's like a general rule of thumb, because as always, I like the openness of non-positional spreads because I let them guide me, right? The Queen of Cups, the Queen of Wands, rather, is a very, very powerful active card in this spread, but flanked by 2 very, very powerful and active cards. So I would read this. So how would I read this, right? If this were a real client, I'd say, you are very naturally an active doer. You are the Queen of Wands. You are a facilitator of events, of creativity. You're probably like a party planner or an event worker, project manager, right? Like your energy goes into making things happen. The queens to me are the apex of their suit, right? They are the height of the ability of their suit, right? And then the kings are like the emerita. They're the retired ones. So you're naturally very much in this space. So the fact that you're languishing right now is interesting. And why is the question we're beginning with. We're surrounded by the Hierophant and the Lovers. So consecutive cards, 5, 6. But I don't want to read them together because I'm not sure what the Hierophant contextually suggests to me yet, right? The Hierophant is a card for me that could be faith and it could be oppression, so it's going to depend on the context. I need to know more before I can decide what version of the Hierophant, because the Lovers isn't contextualizing it for me quite enough yet, because the Lovers can also be, again, love, partnership, but also obligations. Right. So the Hierophant and the Two of Cups. The Two of Cups has Lover's energy and actually has... All 3 of these cards have very similar color schemes. There's this pink into blue, which is interesting. This is obviously a much darker one. And that's interesting context, right? So it goes like dark, a little less, and light, coming out of the dark, right? They're married to some system. They are wed to and attracted to a certain kind of formality that is no longer serving them. The thing about the Hierophant being such an interesting card, and one reason why it can go in 2 different ways, is it's a 5. So the Hierophant can represent static structures, but superannuated ones, right? Ones that have to retire, ones that are dying. So this person is sort of married to a version of what they do or who they are that is outmoded. But because they're such a strong-willed person and they're so used to being at the top of their game, they're actually not recognizing that. And what's happening actually on the other side of the reading almost echoes that. Right, the Four of Wands, their energy has turned into a 4. 4s are stable, 4s are stagnant. And it's because they are remaining committed to a fire that's not going to burn out. The Hierophant won't burn out, but it's not going to ever get bigger. And it will eventually die out if there's no fuel. So the bottom line is this person's way of doing things has actually become outdated. And they are married to that old way. They are committed to it, and it's actually killing their energy. It's killing their fire, right? Or at least tamping it down to such a degree. So then the next question obviously seems to be, what do I do about it, right? And so without even having to shuffle and draw, I can take up this deck, right, and or these cards, and then here's where the intuition thing was that I was saying. The next card that popped into, or the next question that popped into my head was, what do I do about it, right? So that's the agreement. The agreement is that the question that pops into my head is the right question, that these cards, these as yet unrevealed, this next 5 cards, are about to answer. Whereas normally I would shuffle the deck and ask the question. Here, I'm letting the deck tell me and my intuition what the next question is. So it's really just believing that the next question that comes up is the one that these are the answers to. That's kind of all I was saying. So now I just turn these over, and I say, well, what do you do about it? Okay, we have the 8 of Pentacles. So this is going to involve some actual effort on your part, and it's going to involve probably a kind that you don't like, which is down and dirty. You're actually going to have to get messy, Queen of Wands. We're in the weeds, we're in the dirt. You've got to sort of not go to the place where you're rising above it. The Knight of Swords and the Knight of Cups are like, you got to take a step back from your leadership role, and you've got to go out and be a hunter again. You've got to be a gatherer again, right? And this probably means abandoning your preconceived notions about what your strengths are, because there's no fire in this reading, right? She was the Queen of Wands and the 4 of Wands in the last reading. No fire here. Like the ego, the sense of self-esteem, that's probably the thing that's getting in the way, right? The Queen of Wands, in some instances, in some decks I've seen, has been associated with Leo. So you're going to have to really do some hard thinking and feeling, sensing. You're going to have to start relying on your spirituality, your intuition, to get you where you need to go. And that's going to really involve you rethinking the Ace of Swords, what success looks like, the King of Pentacles. So what does success look like? That's the next question, because it popped into my head. 2 of Pentacles, Page of Wands, the Magician, and the 3 of Pentacles. Again, we've got the Wands back, but it's a page. Success looks like going back to the beginning, to the Magician, to the curiosity of what's possible, right? Mercury's curiosity, right? Mercury invented language and the gods didn't want them to. The 2 of Pentacles also kind of brings together your practical curiosity with your spiritual and magical curiosity, right? The 2 of Wands blends those 2 of Pentacles into something that you can do, that you can see the action of, right? It's a practical thing. It is a thing that can be performed. In adult learning theory, we would say performable, measurable objectives, right? Or SMART goals. Specific, measurable, actionable, what's the R? I never remember the R. Realistic and time-bound, right? SMART. How are you going to do that? You're going to be sort of emotionally curious about what life has to offer in terms of potential. Success actually doesn't look like achieving anything in this case. It looks like coming back to your innocence, coming back to your curiosity, coming back to your sense of what is possible, and recognizing that actually the old ways have changed, and you've really got to start again. So where's one place you can start? What's a step you can take? And then I just repeat, right? And I trust that the question that just popped into my head is the question that I need the answer to, and that the question these cards speak to. 6 of Wands. What's one place that I can start? Knight of Pentacles and the Devil. 7 of Swords and the 6 of Pentacles. We're getting a lot of Pentacles in these next 3 sets, right, where fire was very dominant. So the reading is taking on a very Pentacles equality, which is saying it's going to be grounded. It's going to be something that you're achieving here on Earth. And it should be a rebalancing of your energy, right? There should be a sense of beauty about what you're putting out. So one way that you know you're on the right path is you actually feel like your energy is going in a good direction at last. The clues or things that you can actually start to initiate are a deep dive into the realistic application of things you wanted to be when you were a kid. Why do I say that? Knight of Pentacles is the realistic application, the realistic exploration. Devil is the things you wanted to be as a kid. Why? Because I always talk about this card as being the card that represents who we were before society came and said that's bad. And I have a theory that while wanting to be a baseball player or a firefighter or a stockbroker or a teacher or a doctor, whatever you want to be, you know, most of those things as kids are unlikely, and we don't really understand what it is we're trying to get into. There's something about that gig that speaks to who we think we want to be, right? And our childhood self is unblemished by societal expectations. Yeah, so it's the thing we want to be before life and parents and kids and peers said, no, you can't do that, that's not for you, right? So it's like going into, what did I want to be when I was a kid, and what is that now? What does that mean for me today? What does that job look like? What are the qualities of that job that made me want to do it as a kid? And what are those things that I can take and apply to work today? And then we expand further. Seven of Swords and the Six of Pentacles. This is an interesting one. The Seven of Swords is sevens are interpretive, right? They look within and they say, where are we? What are we thinking, right? Seven of Swords in that case. Sixes, again, we have another six. There's a rebalancing. So life needs to have a flow. I'm just following this line of action. Why am I talking about action? Sixes aren't necessarily active numbers, right? They're actually somewhat lazy. But Earth is active, right? Earth is something we do. And so Earth kind of takes the six quality and activates it a little bit. Earth doesn't seem like it's active because it's slow, but it is active, right? It grows. It just takes its time. It's slow. It's not passive. None of the elements are passive. That's not a word that, there's aggression and receptivity. Earth tends to appear more receptive because it works slowly, but it works. So it's a slow process, I think, is the other thing that six reminds us of. Even though the Six of Wands seems to want to, that has that victory lap, but victory laps aren't fast. You want to enjoy those. So it's like enjoying the process. Yeah, that's what it is. It's enjoying the process of learning, enjoying the process of growing, of fertilizing ourselves, of learning who we wanted to be, and then what that tells us about where we want to go, right? And then this card is giving a little Eight of Wands, but it's just also pointing to the future, And so I just want to sort of do this. Tell me more about that. So this is a nice point to end the reading because we have the Queen of Swords. We started with the Queen of Wands. So when you get there, when you're able to sort of align who you were when you were a kid, and the beautiful work of doing, not the enjoyment of having achieved. That's something that a lot of folks who experience success deal with, right? They want to stay where they've gotten, but life doesn't work that way, and that's why a lot of successful people get very unhealthy. Because there's no amount of success that will ever make them happy, right? So when we reach a level of success, in most cases, the best thing we should do is say, okay, what's next? And start again. That's where this takes us, right? So this whole reading kind of takes us from the Queen of Wands to the Queen of Swords. And where this takes us is kind of an intellectual growth. So the Queen of Wands remains the Queen of Wands, but now she's acting as the Queen of Swords, which means she's learned a lot about herself and she can see more clearly, right? Because swords have perception. And that'll be the path. Now it's a pretty long reading. But this is one case where I might ask the client to record or take notes, because we talked about a lot. We talked about 4 big questions. But you can see I could keep peeling back the layer of this onion, but the reading did kind of guide me to the point where I was like, okay, and this is the punctuation mark, because we're right back to where we started, which is with the Queen. So, yeah, I think this is a really effective technique, especially when you want to explore more than one question about a topic, but you don't know necessarily what those things are. And that's often, I say a lot, the hardest part of doing a reading, particularly when you're reading for yourself, is knowing what the question is and finding the good question, right? And this method kind of takes you there. It takes you to that place without having to struggle too much with the question, which is great for the client, and it's great for you as a reader, even if you're not the client, because you can kind of narrow down. And you may even find when you're doing this live with a client that you're going to actually whittle away to the real question and the thing they really want to know about, for two reasons. One, it may just naturally come out. The other thing is they may get tired of you not answering the question that they didn't ask you, right? The question that they've been waiting for you to get to. And they may just finally say, well, what about this? Which is a thing that happens too. Which is why I always tell clients, like, I know it's scary and vulnerable to tell me what it is you want to know, but, like, that's my job. And I'm not going to run and tell my friends. I'm never going to see you again in most cases. Or if I do, it's going to be at this same event next year. I won't even have remembered what I said a week from now. I usually don't remember what I said in a reading immediately after the reading, right? So, anywho, I guess I've transitioned into advice for getting a reading now, which is, like, if you are getting a reading, if you know what you want to know, ask the reader. They're not going to make fun of you. They're not going to be mad at you. They're not going to tease you. They may not be able to answer the question based on their particular boundaries or skills, but it's not you. It's just that's their method, right? But no, there's no reason not to ask a reader a question, especially if you're paying. But as a reader, I feel like if I'm doing the work, give me everything I need to help you get what you wanted out of it. Like, I begin every reading by saying, this is your time. I want you to get out of it what you want or what you need, right? Because you may not get what you want out of it, but you're going to get what you need out of it. Where was I going with that? Oh, again, like, there's all this stuff, and I've written about this, and I've made other videos about it too, where it's like, don't reveal too much to the reader. Don't let them read your body language. Like, why? That's so dumb. You know what I mean? Do you want an answer, or do you want to be impressed? You know? Because the more you hold back, the harder it is for the reader to connect with you, and to know that we're getting anywhere near what you need, you know? So, anyway, blah, blah, blah. So, that's this technique. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care, be well, and we will talk soon. Bye. Be good.